Living away from home conjures a lot of mixed emotions. On one hand, it's hard not to miss the old routines you fell into back then that made things seem more secure. But on the other hand, it's like taking your first drive after passing the test. If A-levels try to hammer home that you are becoming an adult, then college and university is when that actually happens. Because the leash had been taken off, you didn't need to comply with set expectations anymore. You could wear your own clothes to class, get as blackout drunk as you wanted, and have takeaways for dinner as long as your student finance came in on time. There was something so liberating about my time at university. I usually started my days out of class getting lunch in town with friends, going out to one of the societies for games of Mario Kart or Dungeons & Dragons, and popping into the comic shop beside the guild hall. There was all this excess of stuff that I liked, and after spending so much of my adolescence trying to downplay my interests in some vain attempt to fit in, like this would fix myself, before eventually realizing I didn't need to be fixed. It was life-affirming for me. Derry was a lot of things. They also had the best Halloween events, but if I was to boil it down into the fewest words possible, it would be that being independent let you slowly become your true self for the first time. And I remember this one night around my cousins where, after a nice dinner and playing Uncharted on their 4K TV, there was this moment where I just sat back and thought life would never be this good again. I had this comfort and security that felt real, and those nights of just getting to hang out in the uni flat were something truly special. And then, on March 13th, I got on a bus back home, and I didn't come back. I'm not going to pretend that makes me in any way unique. I think a lot of people were thrown a kick in the proverbial rear end from 2020, and so far, everything I've done on this channel has been busy work for me to get away from all the negative stuff that no one wants to talk about. But it's also a new year, and with that comes some new resolutions to step out of my little comfort zone and try new things that are still socially acceptable. So far, I've talked about games where you can fight, where you can swing, and well, you know, die. Which is basically everything video games can do, right?
You're fired.
It's probably strange that a vast majority of these essays I've done so far are on a medium that I'm not aspiring to go into. Like, my main field of interest is filmmaking, and it always has been. So, why is that? Well, I think out of all other mediums out there, video games have the potential to be this great all-inclusive package. Something that can take the cinematic influence of film, the narrative of literature, and add a crucial component that neither could offer by themselves, and that is our interactivity. Because in video games, we have the luxury of control to decide the pace of the story's narrative progression, while in a film that would be in the control of the editor or the author on their ability to write. Along with that, the ways in which video game stories have been told have also evolved exponentially with technology. Back in the early days of the NES, where games looked like this, it wasn't expected that they would make a story out of you playing. Like, the most significant plot development in the original Super Mario Bros. Is learning that the princess is in another castle. Because transitioning from arcade to home consoles pulled across the simple shared idea of just getting the player to hand over cash for the experience of playing, not reading, because, you know, reading's for nerds. Then when we entered the 5th generation with the likes of the Nintendo 64 and the original PlayStation, which introduced 3D polygonal graphics to the mainstream, the ways in which games were presented and told also changed, because now there were camera movements and characters with actual depth. I mean, look at his face. He can emote, I think. With games like Metal Gear Solid built upon its story, the floodgates were now open for more games to incorporate more complex storytelling, and also David Cage games, which are their own genre and not very good. Jason! What frustrates me about this evolution is how this push has resulted in the idea of committing more to cinematic storytelling rather than embracing the inherent strength and versatility that games could offer. Like, you see this in so much marketing nowadays, pushing AAA games as, quote, cinematic. Like it's trying to justify its own existence to fall into some weirdly held stigma that video games can't be art. The same way people use terms like elevated horror to try and convince themselves it could be more meaningful. Like, hot take, both Last of Us games were built to be HBO miniseries rather than games because their use of cinematic language is much stronger than their interactivity. Like, you could feasibly put the original game in any other medium and it would probably still work. And as for the sequel, honestly, I think the structure made it better suited to being a video game with the split narrative paths and the longer runtime, giving the chance to explore more of its dual main characters, but it still falls into this trap of feeling more like an elaborate roller coaster that we can't really operate or control. Games can give us windows into stories and characters we wouldn't normally see because we embody these characters, we feel their struggles, dependent on how the developers pre-programmed the selected actions we can take. But sometimes it doesn't have to employ this to be special or make some grand statement. Instead, a story can use the trappings of its genre and its medium to say things that are more nuanced. I like how The Descent on the surface is a well-constructed bottle film that complements its creature feature roots, which also offers this more nuanced dive into the distrust and painful nature of many long-term friendships. There can be so much more beyond a surface level, stories that can say things about the human condition, showing us at our best with the capacity of kindness and love, as well as our worst traits of hatred and bigotry against those we see as different. These two conflicting sides are constantly intertwined. Where there is one, the other will always be close behind. And this is shared across many of the characters in one of my favorite games of last year, June 24th, 1993 was the day homosexuality was decriminalized in the Republic of Ireland, with a referendum for gay marriage being approved in November of 2015. This would lead the way to other reforms including domestic violence protections, along with funding towards health and social services for LGBT groups. In concept, this sounds like a step forward towards equality, but introducing change to an established system, no matter how well implemented, will still have those unwilling to accept the new status quo, because for the most part, people are just unwilling to change. This is where we meet Kasio, a young trans woman returning home to Achill Island, off the west coast of Ireland, over the course of the Christmas season of 1993, where we just see her trying to adapt to being back in a place that they never wanted to come back to. Probably the first thing that's going to hit anyone aside from the scratchy vaporwave aesthetic is the very specific setting and how it embodies the national identity. It's no secret that Irish representation in mainstream media is not good, let alone Ireland in general. We're seen as overly whimsical and reduced to incomprehensible muttering nonsense, where the south is nothing but countryside and the north is just hell. Which isn't untrue in some cases, but a lot of this comes from a clear arrogance shown towards the country. Like, it says something that some of the earliest examples of iconic horror fiction came from Ireland, but rarely do they take place there because it appears too out there a setting to be appealing. And the real horror is that this is still happening today with, oh god, oh dear god, why must you hurt us? Haven't you done enough?
Why are you the way that you are? I hate so much about the things that you choose to be
Immediately, If Found bucks this by generating a real sense of authenticity towards its setting, which is no surprise given its developer Dreamfeel originated from Ireland. Everything from names, the references to Bosco and the Late Late Toy Show, to even the use of very specific county slang shows real effort put into creating this very real snapshot of a culture that has never really been seen outside the romanticism of Hollywood. I've lived in the countryside for most of my life, and if there's anything a person coming from a rural community will tell you is that everyone knows who you are, who you went to school with, your first relationship, when you left home to go see the world, and how coming back without saying it to anyone, well, everyone already knows. All the things you associate, from the isolation felt from the environment, the beauty of the countryside, to those strangers you bump into with these wild bits of wisdom, even that real passive aggression shown by Casio's mother, or Mammy if you prefer, feels so scarily close to real life I had to pause and start writing this paragraph. Because the game has done such a superb job at creating its reality, which isn't that different from our own, but with the luxury of viewing this from a secluded point of view. On that note, it's time to talk about how you actually interact with that writing. As the main tool throughout your playthrough is an eraser that you control either using your mouse or finger to reveal information about a character's history while also removing it. There's this catharsis in burning through some of the more painful interactions, but also a sadness as well, because no matter how much you remove, those scars are always there. The feeling is intensified with how the invisible camera uses some really effective techniques to convey progression and tension, like passing through black holes to indicate the start of a new chapter that correlates with that particular color choice, as well as having a more shaky, unfocused feeling as the story grows more intense. While there isn't much in terms of branching paths outside of the ones that come into play at the end, what is shown is really effective characterization. There's definitely some you can identify as purely antagonistic, but many of the characters are constantly shown in shades of grey. For example, the trio of Colm, Jack, and Shane who take Kasio in early on in the story are these super close group of friends who started up a band in a rundown house, which has this air of rebellion to it, and as the group grows closer, there's this warmth and compassion that is sorely missing from Casio's real family unit. But at the same time, they are also shown to be as directionless and flawed as she is, and at a certain point can't really show the real support that is needed, and really the only way for Kasio to heal is to truly find themselves and go through this awful time by themselves, when it feels like the walls are closing in and no matter how loud you shout, no one can hear you, and that's hard. It's hard to deal with suffering, to be in a place that you can never quite escape from, and it's from all that pain If Found shows its true colors. Literally, because after all this, we finally get that sweet release at the end, when all the divergent plot threads and characters come back together, and in doing so, gives us as players the first scene of truly balanced, saturated color, no longer overbearing or underexposed, just relaxing. It then does something that only video games can do. The epilogue allows you to forge your own path. Maybe it's not exactly the way you want it, but there are choices there for all the major players within the story, and in its final moments, it's Kasio, it's you, creating who you want to be by writing your own name, and after going through all those harmful experiences, while the scars are always going to be there, a new blank page is also created as well for whoever you want to be, because you don't need to be fixed. You never had to. If Found is a game about a lot of things. It's about love, hatred, that weird space in life where we have no direction, and the human spirit in our ability to hate and also show love. I think that's something the world really needs right now, and we always have the chance to start a new chapter to turn things around, because no matter how many times we trip up, we always have the chance to get back up. And there are people out there who will love you for who you are. All of this was done in a 3-hour video game, and that's really fucking amazing. So the next time some snooty prick says that games can't be art when its main purpose is to draw emotion from you, then If Found is a genuinely beautiful example of gaming storytelling that still has a long way to go. I thought I could fix myself, and then I realized I didn't need to be fixed. I never had to. So, thank you.
I know things aren't exactly where you want to be right now, but I promise you they will improve. Every time someone steps up and says who they are, the world becomes a better, more interesting place.